I still remember the exact words she said, not because they were loud or cruel, but because they were soft. Too soft. The kind of tone people use when they've already decided something, and they're just trying to make it sound polite. "Maybe you should give us some space, Mom," she said. "I think Ethan and I need some time to build our own home, without visitors for a while." She said it with a smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. And I just stood there, my hands still holding the casserole dish I'd made for them. The one I always brought whenever I came by. It wasn't the words that hurt the most. It was the way my son didn't say anything. He just stood beside her, eyes fixed on the floor, his fingers nervously tracing the wedding ring she'd given him. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Not the comfortable kind we used to share when watching old movies together, but the heavy, suffocating kind that tells you everything you need to know. I wanted to say something motherly, maybe like "I understand" or "you're right," but my throat tightened, and all I could manage was a quiet nod. So I left. I walked back to my car, my heart echoing with every step. The casserole was still warm, the smell of baked chicken and herbs filling the car. It used to be Ethan's favorite. He'd always say, "Mom, no one makes it like you do." That night, I put the dish in the fridge and told myself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe he'd call tomorrow, but the phone never rang. Days turned into weeks, and every time I passed their house on my way to the market, I slowed down just a little, hoping to see my son's car, hoping maybe he'd wave. He never did. It's strange how love can be so strong, and yet, somehow, silence can still win. I used to think being a mother meant I'd always have a place in my child's life, but that day, standing on their doorstep, I learned that sometimes love asks you to step back, even when it breaks your heart to do so. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of the longest silence my son and I would ever share. You know, when I think about Ethan, I don't see the man who stood silently beside his wife that day. I see the little boy who used to follow me around the kitchen, his small hands trying to stir the pot or lick the spoon when he thought I wasn't looking. He was my miracle child. I had him late in life, when I'd already given up on the idea of motherhood. The doctors said it would be difficult, maybe impossible, but there he was, small, pink, perfect, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine like they never wanted to let go. From the moment he was born, Ethan and I were inseparable. When his father passed away suddenly, a car accident that none of us saw coming, Ethan was only 8. He was too young to understand grief, but old enough to feel the empty space his father left behind. I remember those nights when he'd sneak into my bed, pretending he'd had a nightmare. He'd whisper, "Mom, can I stay with you tonight?" And I'd smile and make space for him, pretending not to notice that his pillow was wet from tears. We built our little world together after that, just the two of us, quiet dinners, Sunday church, long walks to the park. He grew up watching me work 2 jobs, teaching piano lessons in the evenings and cleaning houses during the day, and not once did he complain. He'd say, "When I grow up, Mom, you won't have to work anymore. I'll take care of you." Those words, I carried them with me like a promise. Every time I was tired, every time my back ached or my hands trembled from scrubbing floors, I'd remember that voice, my little boy's voice, and it gave me strength. Ethan grew into a kind, thoughtful young man. He was the kind of son other mothers prayed for, the kind who called every night from college just to check in, the kind who remembered birthdays and brought flowers home just because. Then one day, he called and said, "Mom, I met someone. Her name was Clara." He said it with a light in his voice that I hadn't heard in years. I could tell, even before I met her, that she was special to him. The first time I met Clara was at my house. Ethan had brought her over for Sunday dinner. She was polite, quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of woman who smiled without showing her teeth. I remember noticing how she kept glancing around, as if she was studying every detail of my home. The old floral curtains, the faded family photos, the smell of lavender and lemon oil that lingered in the air. She was beautiful, though elegant in a way I never was. Her hair perfectly pinned, her dress simple but and when she looked at Ethan, her whole face softened. That's what made me like her, at least at first. I wanted to believe she would love him, the way I always had, and maybe she did. But love, I've learned, doesn't always come with kindness. At first, everything was fine. They visited often. Ethan would still call every few days, asking if I needed anything, or telling me about their plans, how they were saving up for a house, how Clara wanted a garden. I never interfered. I told myself, he's grown now. He needs to build his own life. but deep down, I missed being needed. I missed being someone's home. After their wedding, things began to shift, slowly, almost invisibly. The phone calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. Sometimes, when I'd call, Clara would answer and say, "Oh, Ethan's busy right now. I'll tell him you called." But somehow, he never called back. I told myself it was normal. Every son drifts a little after marriage. I tried to understand that Clara wanted to build her own traditions, her own rhythm. Still, there was an ache, a quiet one, the kind that sits in your chest and doesn't go away. One day, I decided to surprise them. I made Ethan's favorite casserole and some sweet tea and drove over on a Saturday afternoon. When I arrived, I noticed the car in the driveway, hers, not his, and for a moment, I hesitated. Should I knock? Should I call first? No, I thought, I'm his mother. I don't need an invitation. So I went up to the door and rang the bell. Clara opened it. Her face froze for half a second before she smiled. "Mrs. Green, I didn't know you were coming." I smiled back. "I just thought I'd bring Ethan something special." She stepped aside politely but didn't move fully out of the doorway. Her tone was pleasant, but there was something else beneath it. Something sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. "Ethan's not home right now," she said. "But thank you. That's very kind." I stood there, casserole in hand, feeling suddenly foolish. "I can wait," I said softly. She hesitated, then sighed. "Well, I suppose you could come in for a bit." The visit was brief, awkward. She offered me water, which I didn't drink, and I noticed how her eyes kept darting toward the clock. When Ethan finally came home, his surprise was genuine, but his joy, muted. "Mom, you didn't tell me you were coming," he said. "I wanted to surprise you," I replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes either. It was a small moment, a tiny crack in what had once been something whole. But that's how it begins, doesn't it? Distance doesn't happen overnight. It's built quietly, word by word, until one day, the silence feels normal. I didn't know it then, but that visit was the beginning of the end. The last time my son and I would ever share a meal without tension. After that afternoon, I noticed something had changed, not just in Ethan, but in the space between us. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a door slowly closing without anyone noticing. The next few weeks passed in silence. I waited for Ethan to call, to ask how I was, or thank me for the casserole. He didn't. So, one Sunday morning, I called him. "Hi, sweetheart," I said cheerfully, trying to sound light. There was a pause on the other end before he answered. "Hey, Mom, sorry, I've been busy." Busy. That word, it became the wall between us. Busy with work, busy with life, busy being married. I tried not to take it personally, but when weeks turned into months, I realized I was becoming a visitor in my own son's life. Every Sunday, I would still cook roast chicken, cornbread, greens, as if he might show up. I'd set the table for two, even though I knew he wouldn't come. It was my way of keeping him close somehow, through smells, through memory. Sometimes, I'd catch myself whispering grace at the table, "Lord, keep him safe," and my voice would tremble just a little on the word safe. One evening, my neighbor, Mrs. Lee, stopped by. She was kind, one of those women who always brought over banana bread when she thought you looked lonely. "You haven't had Ethan around lately," she said gently. I smiled. "He's just busy. You know how it is." But I could see in her eyes that she knew better. Loneliness has a way of showing on your face no matter how much you try to hide it. Was around that time that Ethan started missing my birthday calls. The first year, he said he forgot because of a business trip. The second year, he sent a text, just a text. "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're doing something fun today." I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't even know how to reply. Fun. The last time I'd had fun was when he and I baked cookies together in that tiny kitchen. I sent back, "Thank you, sweetheart. I love you." He didn't reply. About 6 months later, I got a call from my sister, Ruth. She was hosting a small family barbecue and asked me to invite Ethan and Clara. I hesitated, but I said, "Sure, I'll ask." When I called Ethan, he sounded distracted. I'll check with Clara," he said. Later that evening, he called back. "Mom, Clara's not feeling well. Maybe next time." Next time never came. I stopped asking after a while. You can only reach out so many times before your hands start to feel empty. A few months later, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see my son, to look him in the eyes and ask what had changed. So I baked a pie, the same kind I used to make when he was little, apple with a cinnamon crust, and drove to their house again. When I got there, I saw Clara through the window. She was setting the table, arranging flowers in a vase. It looked like she was expecting guests. I rang the bell. Clara opened the door, her expression flickering from surprise to discomfort. "Oh, Mrs. Green, hello." I smiled. "I just wanted to stop by and bring something for you both." She hesitated, then said, "Actually, we have company coming over soon. It might not be a good time." I looked past her shoulder and saw a table set for 4. 2 of the chairs had name cards, Mom and Dad, but they weren't for me. They were for Clara's parents. My throat tightened, but I managed a small smile. "Oh, of course," I said softly. "I don't want to intrude." She nodded politely. "Maybe you can call next time before coming by. It's just easier that way." Easier. That word echoed in my mind the whole drive home. Easier for who? I parked the car outside my house and sat there, the smell of cinnamon filling the air, the pie still warm in the passenger seat. I didn't take it inside. I couldn't. I just sat there for a long time, watching the porch light flicker, and whispered to myself, maybe this is how it happens, little by little. After that, I stopped visiting unannounced. I stopped calling as much too. I told myself that if Ethan wanted to see me, he would. But the truth, I was scared. Scared that if I reached out again, he'd pull even further away. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd take out the old photo albums. Ethan in his school uniform, Ethan holding his first trophy, Ethan hugging me with that big, toothy smile. I'd trace his face with my finger and whisper, "Where did you go, baby?" And sometimes, I'd imagine Clara finding those same photos one day, and wondering who that woman was, the one standing next to her husband, smiling with pride. Then one morning, a letter came in the mail. It was an invitation. Ethan and Clara were celebrating their 3rd wedding anniversary. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was his way of making things right. Maybe we'd finally talk. I bought a new dress, soft blue, the color Ethan used to say looked nice on me. I wrapped a small gift, a framed photo of him as a boy, standing beside me with his graduation cap tilted sideways. When I arrived at the restaurant, I saw them sitting with friends, laughing, holding hands. They looked happy. But when Ethan saw me, his expression froze just slightly. "Mom, you came," he said, standing up awkwardly. Clara smiled politely, but didn't stand. There was an extra chair, but it was at the far end of the table. For 2 hours, I sat there smiling, laughing when others laughed, even though I didn't understand half of what they were talking about. Not once did Ethan look my way the way he used to, that small, loving glance that said, "You're my home." When the night ended, I kissed him on the cheek and said, "I'm proud of you, son." He smiled faintly. "Thanks, Mom." "No, I love you." "No, drive safe, just thanks." I found out later, through a friend, that Clara had told people I was a little overbearing, that I called too much, that I didn't understand boundaries. Those words cut deep, because all I ever wanted was to be part of my son's life, to love him, not control him. I didn't know that love could make someone feel like an outsider. I didn't know that motherhood had an expiration date. One evening, while watering my plants, the phone rang. It was Ethan. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked quietly. My heart leapt. "Of course, sweetheart, always." But his voice trembled when he said the words that would change everything. "Mom, Clara feels uncomfortable with how often you drop by. She thinks it might be best if maybe you don't come over for a while." For a while, that phrase hung in the air like a storm cloud. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there, staring at the wall, the sound of my own heartbeat filling the silence. Then I said, very softly, "I understand." But I didn't. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off. The house felt too quiet, too empty. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not because I was angry, but because I finally realized something. You can give your whole heart to someone, raise them, protect them, love them, and one day, they might still walk away, not out of cruelty, but out of comfort. And sometimes, comfort doesn't leave room for the people who built it. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing Ethan's words over and over. "Maybe you don't come over for a while." They echoed in every corner of my house, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the creak of the hallway floor, in the clock ticking by the window. It wasn't just what he said, it was how carefully he said it, like someone trying not to hurt a child who's already fragile. Like I was the problem to be handled gently. That realization broke something inside me. When morning came, I moved through the house in slow motion. I made my tea, fed the cat, opened the curtains, but nothing felt right. The sunlight didn't feel warm that day. It felt like a spotlight on everything I had lost. For years, I'd lived for those moments, his visits, his calls, his laughter filling the living room. Now all I had were memories, and they suddenly felt like ghosts that wouldn't leave. I sat at the table staring at my phone, half expecting him to call and say, "Mom, I didn't mean it like that," but he didn't. Instead, the phone stayed silent, and I realized silence has a sound of its own, a sound that only mothers can truly hear. My sister Ruth came by later that week. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. She could see it in my face. I poured her some coffee and sat across from her, my hands trembling. "He told me not to come over anymore," I said quietly. Ruth frowned. "He said that." I nodded. She took a slow sip, thinking, maybe he's just trying to balance things. Newlyweds sometimes. Her voice trailed off. She didn't know how to finish the sentence without lying. I smiled weakly. "It's okay, Ruth. He's building his own life. That's what I wanted for him." But my voice cracked on the word wanted. Ruth reached over and squeezed my hand. "You raised him well. He'll come around. He just needs time." Time. Everyone kept saying that word, like it was medicine that could heal everything. But what if time didn't bring him back? What if it only taught him how to live without me? 2 weeks later, my phone rang again. "Ethan." For a moment, my heart leaped. Maybe he missed me. Maybe he realized he'd gone too far. But his voice was rushed, distant. "Hey Mom, just checking in. How are you?" I wanted to say, "I'm lonely. I miss you. Please come home for dinner." But instead, I said, "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you and Clara?" He talked for a few minutes about work, the new apartment, Clara's promotion. It was small talk, polite, careful. Then, he said something that froze me in place. "Mom, Clara's parents are coming to stay for a few months, so we might not be around much. Just wanted you to know." My throat tightened. "Oh, that's wonderful," I said softly. "I hope you all have a lovely time." After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the photo of us on the mantel. Ethan, as a boy, his arm wrapped around me. It felt like that photo belonged to another lifetime. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I sat on the edge of my bed, the room dark except for the glow of the streetlight outside. All the things I hadn't said came rushing out. Every "I miss you," every "I'm proud of you," every "please don't forget me." I cried until my chest ached, until there were no more tears left to fall. When I finally looked up, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and I didn't recognize myself. There was a woman there with tired eyes and a trembling mouth, a woman who had spent her life giving everything and didn't know how to stop. That's when I whispered to myself, "It's time to let go." Not because I wanted to, but because holding on was starting to hurt more than losing. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild my days without Ethan in them. I joined a small church group, started tending to my garden again, and took long walks in the park. But even then, I'd see mothers with their grown sons, laughing over coffee, sharing stories, and my heart would ache in quiet envy. One afternoon at the grocery store, I saw Clara from a distance. She was standing by the fruit section, holding her phone and smiling. I almost walked over, but something inside me said, "Don't." Not because I was angry, but because I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. So I just watched for a moment, then turned my cart and walked away. That was the moment I truly understood. Sometimes love means stepping back, even when every part of you wants to reach forward. A few months later, I got a text from Ethan. "Mom, can you stop by? We need to talk." For a second, I felt that old spark of hope again. Maybe things were finally changing. I baked his favorite cookies, chocolate chip with a sprinkle of sea salt, and drove to his house. When I arrived, Clara opened the door. She was polite, as always, but her eyes told me this wasn't a happy visit. We sat down in the living room. Ethan looked nervous, his hands clasped together. "Mom," he began, "I don't know how to say this, but Clara and I feel like we need some space. We love you, but sometimes you show up unannounced, and it's been hard to adjust." I felt the room spinning, but I kept my face calm. "I didn't mean to make things hard," I whispered. "I just miss you." Ethan's eyes softened for a moment, but Clara spoke before he could answer. "We understand, Mrs. Green. It's just, we're trying to build our own rhythm as a couple." Mrs. Green. She hadn't called me Mom since the wedding. I nodded slowly, feeling my throat tighten. "I understand," I said quietly. "I'll give you space." I stood up to leave, but Ethan followed me to the door. "Mom, don't be upset, okay? he said gently. I smiled, the kind of smile you give when you're trying not to fall apart. I'm not upset, sweetheart. I'm just learning. He hugged me then, but it was a light, quick hug. Not the kind that says, I need you. It was the kind that says, I care, but I have to go. When I got to my car, I placed the box of cookies on the passenger seat, still warm. I thought about taking them back inside to him, but instead, I drove away. That was the last time I saw the inside of their house. After that day, Sundays became the hardest. They used to be our day. Church, lunch, laughter, family. Now, they were just long and quiet. I'd sit by the window with my tea, watching the world go by, wondering if Ethan ever thought of me. Sometimes, I'd pick up my phone and scroll through our old messages. I'd stop at one, from years ago. Love you, Mom. Couldn't have done it without you. I'd read it over and over, like a prayer I didn't want to forget. Then came my birthday. I told myself not to expect anything, but deep down, I still hoped. The day went by quietly, no call, no visit, not even a message. When evening came, I blew out a single candle on a small cake I'd bought for myself, and for the first time, I whispered, Happy birthday, Mary. It felt strange to say my name out loud, like I was reminding myself that I still existed outside of being someone's mother. A few days later, I wrote Ethan a letter. I never meant to send it. It was just something I needed to do for myself. My dear son, I know life is busy, and you're building your own world now. I don't want to stand in the way of your happiness, but I hope, once in a while, you'll remember the home that raised you. Remember the woman who stayed up late sewing your school costumes, who cheered the loudest at your games, who waited by the window every time you were late coming home. I'll always be here, not waiting, but loving you quietly, from a distance. That when I finished, I folded it neatly, tucked it into an envelope, and placed it inside the family photo album. It's still there, between the page of his first steps and his high school graduation. Because sometimes love doesn't need to be sent, it just needs to be remembered. That was the turning point of my life. The moment I realized love can't always stay the same. Sometimes, it has to change its shape, find a quieter way to exist. I stopped waiting for Ethan to call. I stopped baking on Sundays. I started living for myself again, not out of anger, but out of peace. Because one day, I understood something simple yet powerful. You can't make someone need you the way they once did, but you can still love them without being in the way. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. The pain that once woke me in the middle of the night slowly became something I carried more quietly, like a scar that still aches when the rain comes, but no longer bleeds. Weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, a year had passed since I last stepped into Ethan's home. I didn't mark the date on a calendar, but my heart always knew. I started filling my days with small, steady joys. I joined a women's book circle at church. Every Thursday evening, we'd sit in a circle of worn armchairs, tea steaming in our cups, talking about stories that somehow mirrored our own lives. One night, we read a line that stayed with me. Sometimes love means letting someone walk their own road, even if it takes them far from you. I remember sitting there, blinking back tears, thinking how true that was, how love, real love, is often quiet and patient. I began painting again, too. It had been years since I'd picked up a brush. At first, my hands were stiff, but as the days passed, the colors started to flow. Soft blues, golden lights, the color of forgiveness. My home started to feel alive again. Not because Ethan came back, but because I stopped waiting for him to. One Saturday morning, I went to the farmer's market downtown. It was early autumn, the air crisp, leaves rustling underfoot. As I reached for a basket of apples, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Mom. I froze. That voice, I would have known it anywhere. I turned, and there he was, Ethan, standing a few steps away, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, guilt and longing. Ethan, I whispered. He took a slow step forward. I didn't expect to see you here. We both stood there for a moment, neither knowing what to say. He looked thinner, older, not in years, but in spirit. How have you been? He asked quietly. I smiled softly. I've been fine, sweetheart. And you? He hesitated. I've been okay. Then his voice cracked just a little. Mom, I owe you an apology. We walked to a nearby bench, the sound of laughter and market chatter fading into the distance. He took a deep breath. I should have never let things go so far. Clara and I, We thought we were setting boundaries, but we ended up building walls instead. And I didn't see what that did to you. I didn't speak right away. I wanted to choose my words carefully. Ethan, I said finally, you were building a life, and that's what I always wanted for you. I just didn't realize it meant I had to lose a part of you to make it happen. His eyes glistened. You didn't lose me, Mom. I lost you. That broke me in the best way because it was the truth I'd been waiting to hear. He reached out, and for the first time in a long while, he took my hands in his. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all the times I didn't call, for making you feel unwanted. You never deserved that. I felt my heart swell and soften all at once. I forgive you, Ethan, I said gently, because one day, you'll be a father too, and I want you to remember this. Forgiveness keeps families whole, even when life pulls them apart. A week later, Ethan called again. Mom, he said, his voice lighter this time, would you come over for dinner? Clara and I would love to see you. For a moment, I hesitated, not out of bitterness, but out of fear. Fear that it might all feel too fragile. But then, I smiled and said, I'd love to. When I arrived, the house looked different. There were photos on the walls, vacations, birthdays, laughter, frozen in time. Clara greeted me at the door. She looked nervous, but she smiled. Mom, thank you for coming. That one word, Mom, was enough to melt the year of distance. Dinner was simple, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, but to me, it felt like a feast. We talked, we laughed softly. We avoided the heavy things at first, but sometimes, love doesn't need to fix the past right away. Sometimes, it just needs to show up at the table again. After dinner, Clara offered to make tea. When she went into the kitchen, Ethan and I sat in the living room, the same living room I had left in tears a year ago, but this time, it felt different, warmer, softer, filled with forgiveness. Ethan looked around, then turned to me. Mom, he said quietly, Clara's pregnant. For a moment, the room went still. Then I smiled, a real, deep, unguarded smile. Oh, Ethan, congratulations. He looked at me like a boy again, his eyes shining with hope. Will you help us? I mean, when the baby comes. I chuckled softly. Are you sure Clara's okay with that? He smiled. She's the one who asked. I laughed then, a sound I hadn't made in months. It felt like sunlight after a long winter. When their daughter was born, Ethan called me from the hospital. Mom, he said, his voice full of joy. She's beautiful. We named her Grace. Grace. What a perfect name. The first time I held her, I felt the circle of life turn quietly inside me. All the pain, the distance, the misunderstandings, they seemed so small compared to the tiny heartbeat in my arms. Clara watched me with soft eyes. Thank you for being patient with us, she said. I didn't realize how much Ethan needed you, how much we both did. I smiled, tears blurring my vision. It's all right, dear. Sometimes families just need time to remember what love looks like. Sundays began to feel like Sundays again. The laughter, the smell of food, the sound of little Grace's giggles, they filled the air like a hymn. I didn't come over every week anymore. I didn't need to. When I did, it was special. A reminder that love, once fractured, can still heal if you handle it gently. Sometimes, Clara would send me photos, Grace's first smile, her messy face after eating, Ethan reading her bedtime stories. Every picture felt like a small thank you, a quiet bridge between what was and what could still be. One evening, I sat by the window of my home, the same window where I once waited for my son to come back. The sunset painted the sky in gold and violet, and I thought about how far we'd come. Life hadn't given me everything I wanted, but it gave me enough to be grateful. Sometimes, motherhood isn't about holding on, it's about learning to let go, and trusting that love will find its way back home. I looked over at the photo of Ethan holding baby Grace, and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, because in the end, love didn't leave me, it just changed its form. It grew softer, older, and wiser, and maybe that's what grace really means, to forgive, to accept, and to keep loving, even when the story changes. If you're listening to this tonight, and someone you love has grown distant, I hope you remember this. Love doesn't disappear just because it grows quiet. Sometimes it hides in the pauses, in the spaces between calls, in the way you still think of them when no one's watching. Be patient, be kind, and most of all, don't let bitterness steal the beauty of your heart, because one day, they might come back. And when they do, let forgiveness be the first thing you offer. That's what I learned when my son's wife told me to stop coming over, and that's how I found peace. Not in being needed, but in simply loving. Still, I didn't see my son for almost 2 months after that day. He didn't call, he didn't visit, and I didn't either. Not because I was angry, but because I needed to learn something about silence, about stepping back, and about letting love breathe on its own. During that time, I focused on myself, my little garden, my old photo albums, and the simple joy of tea by the window. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to knock on my door. I wasn't waiting for my son to call, or for someone to need me. It was strange at first. Then, it became peaceful. I realized how much of my life had revolved around others, serving, helping, fixing, until I forgot who I was when I was alone. Maybe that's what life was trying to teach me, that sometimes, love doesn't mean holding on tightly. Sometimes, it means giving others the space to find you again when they're ready. One cold evening in early December, I heard a knock on my door. It was raining softly, the kind of rain that smelled like old memories. When I opened the door, my son was standing there. His hair was wet, his face pale. He looked tired. "Mom," he said softly, "can I come in?" I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside and let him in. He sat at the dining table, the same one where we had shared so many meals, and stared at his hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Mom," he began, his voice trembling, "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her. I should have told her she was wrong to speak to you that way." I looked at him, his eyes full of guilt and confusion, the same eyes that used to look at me with pure love when he was little. "I know she's trying," he continued, "but she's struggling. She feels like I still belong more to you than to her. She thinks she's competing for my love." I nodded slowly. "And are you?" I asked quietly. He looked down. "No, Mom, but maybe I made her feel that way." There was silence again, not heavy this time, but healing. I reached out, placing my hand over his. "Son," I said softly, "I don't blame her, or you. I was once a new wife too, trying to find my place. I remember how hard it was to feel like I was never enough for your father's family. Maybe she just needs time to build her own world without me in every corner of it." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. You're my home." I smiled gently. "And you always will be mine. But homes change, my son. You're building your own now. Just remember, there's always room here if you ever need to come back, no matter what." He broke down then, quietly, not dramatically, just tears falling one after another, like rain easing into the soil. I let him cry, and I cried too. That evening, we didn't talk about blame or right and wrong. We talked about life, how fast it moves, how love shifts its shape, and how sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do is to let go lovingly. Before he left, he hugged me tightly, like the little boy who used to cling to me before school. "I'll make things right," he whispered. "I know you will," I said. Weeks later, things did begin to change. Slowly, naturally, my daughter-in-law started calling again. At first, just to check in, short, polite conversations. Then, she asked if I could share my soup recipe with her. The next week, she sent me pictures of the garden she was planting. Said she thought of me when she picked the flowers. And one Sunday afternoon, she invited me over for tea. When I arrived, I noticed something small but meaningful. She had set the table with my old teacups, the ones I'd given her when they married. There was a plate of cookies, and beside it, a vase with fresh marigolds, my favorite. "Please sit," she said, smiling shyly. "I hope you like chamomile." I did. We talked, not like rivals, not like two women competing for the same man's attention, but like two people who finally understood each other. She confessed she had been scared I would never accept her, scared that she would never be enough. And I told her that I, too, had been scared that my son wouldn't need me anymore, scared that love had an expiration date. We both cried, and then we laughed, because somehow, it felt like we were both letting go of something heavy. From that day on, things felt different. She began to visit me often, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Sometimes with my son, sometimes alone. She'd bring me small gifts, a jar of honey, a scarf, a picture of the three of us from their wedding. And one afternoon, while sipping tea together, she said something that stayed with me. "You know, Mama, I didn't realize how much he misses you until I saw how quiet he became without you. I'm sorry for the distance." I smiled, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." As I look back now, I understand something I didn't before. Love changes shape, it doesn't disappear. When your children grow up and start their own lives, they don't stop loving you. They just love you differently. And sometimes, to stay close, you have to give them room to breathe. That's the hardest part of motherhood. Loving without holding, caring without controlling, staying without standing in the way. But when you manage to do that, something beautiful happens. They come back not out of guilt or obligation, but out of genuine love. Now, every Sunday, my son and his wife visit. We cook together, laugh, and talk about simple things. Not the past, not the pain, just the present moment. And sometimes, when my daughter-in-law helps me chop vegetables or folds napkins neatly on the table, she'll smile and say, "Mom, you know, this feels like home." And it does. It truly does. If you're listening tonight, maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe someone you love has drifted away, not because they stopped caring, but because life changed. If that's you, remember this. Love is not about always being there. Sometimes, it's about being the place they know they can return to, without fear, without judgment. Let love breathe. It will always find its way back.